and talented co-host, Katrina Madewell. So she's really kind of my anchor when it comes to this radio stuff. And she's the one that helps me go into breaks and come out of breaks and whatnot. And so if I fumble around a little bit, please give me a little bit of slack because I'm the content host here and she is the professional radio host. We're going to do things a little bit different today. One of the things we've been talking about over the last several weeks are some hard technical facts about how we go about solving IRS problems. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a special guest on the line that actually has an IRS tax problem. His name is John. And just yesterday, let me set this up a little bit better. John and I were talking yesterday, and we talk or chat probably every single day. We have a professional relationship, and over the course of the last year or so, we've really become close friends. And just yesterday, after about a year, he finally came clean and told me he has an IRS problem. So we're going to have John here on the line. John, are you there?
Darrin, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Your phone, as usual, is not sounding real good, so we might have to let you go at some point. But hey, John, I'm glad that you called in. And why don't you set it up for us a little bit? Can you tell me a little bit about the background of your tax problem? And if I need to ask some questions, I'll just go ahead and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had a tax problem probably for the last 4 years. We had a couple of really big years where we had all kinds of money coming in. That was we went to making as much in a 2-week period as we used to make in a year. So you can imagine that was quite a bump in income.
Yeah, we call that a quality problem where I come from.
Yeah, well, it was great, but it did create a lot more problems that seemed than it solved. And one of them was getting in trouble with the IRS. And for the last several years, it's something that's really been weighing me down. And we've been dealing with the IRS and communicating with them, but it's really has held me in bondage in a way that I really didn't realize it was until we spoke yesterday.
So set us up. About how much do you owe? Just rough figure.
About $130,000, $125,000 was the final tally. Okay,
and from what tax year roughly? Do you know?
2011, 2012.
Okay, so this has been going on for 3-4 years. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And you told me yesterday that at some point in time, your business took a really big downturn, right, around 2012, 2013, and ultimately you contacted the IRS and they agreed to place your account into hardship status. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Hardship status, for the benefit of our friends listening, is when the IRS determines that the taxpayer has no present ability to pay on a monthly basis. So it's kind of like a temporary get-out-of-jail-free card, kind of. They'll put your account into hardship status, usually for, a year or two at a time. Sometimes it can go in there semi-permanently. And really, the only way that hardship can benefit you because, it takes the pressure off. Isn't that what happened at first? There was kind of some pressure, and then once you dealt with them, they kind of backed off?
Yeah, it was tremendous pressure left after they backed off and put us into hardship status. Unfortunately, Darrin, it put us into hardship status. In more ways than just one.
Yeah, because I think what you're saying is it's actually a hardship to be making as little money as you're making right now. Is that right?
Yeah. It seemed like it was a godsend because I didn't have the worries. Not only when you make a lot of extra money, not only do you have to deal with the taxes, but also all the problems that come in with the extra money, extra customers and all that. Then have a tax problem on top of it, and then to have the business slow down, and then to be put into hardship status, it felt like it was a safe haven, but it really turned out to be a trap, kind of.
Well, because remember, there's a 10-year statute of limitations for the collection of the tax, and what that means is the IRS only has 10 years from the date that basically the returns are filed until it expires for good. So in a way, it's good that you're in hardship status because let's say a 2011 return was filed in 2012 plus 10 years. In 2022, this is going to be gone if you don't do anything else. But, that's still 7 years, and there's probably 8 years left on the 2012, liability because presuming it was filed on time in 2013. So in a way, it's good because they're not levying you, they're not seizing your assets, and they're not seizing your bank account, and they're not trying to, garnish your wages or levy your income sources. So that's good. And it probably helps with your emotional state and the state of your marriage and stuff like that. Is that right?
Oh yeah, well, I could. After we got put into that status, I could sleep at night, and without worrying about. I felt like I was going to be raided in the middle of the night, and that the IRS was going to send agents and arrest me in front of my children. So when the hardship status was granted to us, that dissipated, and that made sleep a lot easier. Yeah.
Did you happen to listen to last week's show where I talked about my rock star client who he had an appointment like on a Monday, and the Saturday night before his appointment, he was having trouble sleeping, and he heard some noises outside his window, and he was convinced it was the IRS coming to raid him.
Yeah, it's real. I mean, it gets to the point where every little noise you hear, every phone call, even emails, and I would hear it chime come in my email, and I receive hundreds of emails a day. Even the sound of the emails would scare me. And it just was, I didn't realize it was happening, but it was really shameful and fearful for the route I went after that happened. I just wish I would have talked to you a lot longer. That conversation we had yesterday about taking care of this business so I can move on with my life, it was great. It was eye-opening.
You know, John, I really appreciate you calling and sharing this information with, our friends that are listening, because this is a really, really common thing that it takes people a while to understand how they should go about handling this problem, which is, for most people, is really the biggest problem in their lives. Do you think this is your biggest problem that you have right now in your whole life?
100% for sure, yes.
So yesterday, we've been dealing with each other daily, multiple times a day in the course of business. And you know a little bit about my business now. And yesterday, it finally comes up where you admit to me that you owe about $125,000. So tell me, if you can, share with me or share with us why it took you so long.
I was ashamed. And I knew that you and I would have this conversation at one time. But first of all, I wanted to feel out what it was you did and what it is that you do and what the process was. And I was kind of using the hardship blanket as something to hide behind. And I figured that I was going to pay my tax bill as soon as I could figure out what I needed to do to start making more money in my business. So I was waiting for the money to return so I could pay my taxes instead of just talking to you about it. So there's a lot of things wrapped in why I didn't do that, but it was shame. I didn't want you to know that I had a problem. We do business together, and it's not something I like people to know. It's not something I lead off with. You don't lead with your weaknesses. And then you try to hide your weaknesses, and I tried to hide it from you and tried to fix it on my own, but I just realized I can't fix it on my own.
Yeah, the fear that people have wrapped around, having an IRS problem, a tax problem, is really pretty significant. And I like to think that I have a special insight to that, because not only do I deal with clients' fears about dealing with their problems every day, but I've shared with this audience, I've shared with you, I've had at least 2 IRS problems in my life. One was 2 of them were a really long time ago, and one of them was just within the past few years. I had a really good business going that was a side business, and I made a lot of money, and my attitude, foolishly, I really do know better, but my attitude foolishly was, hey, I'll just write a check for this balance due when, at the end of the year when I file the return. And then that business collapsed and I didn't have the money to pay that bill. So I had a period, I owed about $50,000 at that time. And so I got to experience that fear and anxiety and the shame again. And at the time, it really honestly didn't feel all that good. But I know now that I was meant to feel that. And the reason is, I got to go through those emotions, and it allows me to be a more compassionate person, today. So I think that the shame that you were dealing with is really, really common. But if you had any other problem in your life, we're typically not ashamed of those problems, right? If your car was broken down and you didn't have the money to fix it, but you needed a ride to get to work, would you be ashamed?
Absolutely not. It'd just be a problem that needed to be overcome.
Yeah, it just kind of is what it is, right? So, right. I'm not going to be able to solve the audience's, shame wrapped up in having a tax problem here today on the radio, but it's really nice to have somebody else validate that that's something that people go through. The other thing is the fear. Like I was just listening to another show on the way here to the station, and the host was talking about fear and how we need to face our fears. We don't need to face the fear of crossing the street, trying to walk across the interstate, because if you face that fear, you're going to get run over by a truck. But there's other fears that are very healthy to face. And I think one of the fears that people need to face if they have an IRS problem is they need to go get some advice. Now, there are problems that I just can't solve. I can't solve them economically. If you owe $8,000, I'm probably not going to take that case, because you're probably going to end up in hardship status or into a small monthly installment agreement. But, if you're John here and you owe $125,000 and there's still 7 or 8 years left on the statute of limitations, probably something that we ought to have a discussion about. So you were thinking something that I think is really logical, and that is that, hey, I should wait until my finances get better before I can really afford to solve this tax problem. Isn't that what you were thinking?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Can you tell me, because it makes no sense to me because I'm too close to this business, can you tell me why that makes sense to you? Because it probably makes sense to our audience.
Because what happened was, like my business, like your business, that when the bottom fell out of it, I was in the same industry when the bottom fell out of it. Our bottom fell out of it at the same time for both of us. And when it fell out right at the end of the tax year when I was getting ready to pay all my taxes. In fact, I had it in my plan where I was just going to pay all my, instead of paying the installments, I was just going to pay my entire tax bill in November. But it hit November, and then there was no money. And so I've been working like a maniac, and I'm a workaholic, and I put effort in, and I've been working 60 hours a week to get that money back, because to me, that was the issue. It wasn't the fact I owed taxes, it was the fact that my money dried up. And I've been working so hard on getting my money to come back that I've let that problem just fester. And but what's happened is that money hasn't come back. I haven't been successful at doing that because I haven't been running at 100%. I used to be a possibility thinker, and having this IRS issue on my mind, it just slowed my thoughts down, and it just really put me into a fearful status. And I don't want to keep saying that, but it really was bondage, and I just didn't want it anymore. I have to be successful for my family, and this is the step. After knowing you for a year, that I finally decided to take that step and just ask for your help.
Yeah, you said something that was really sort of interesting. You said you were an optimist, and you kept thinking that the business was going to get better, and I think you should continue to think that. I think absolutely, there's no doubt. But after we got done talking, we talked about the possibility of you filing an offer in compromise, and an offer in compromise is where you make a deal to settle for less with the IRS. And without getting too complicated, I'm going to explain how an offer in compromise is calculated. An offer is calculated by taking your monthly disposable income, multiplying that by 12, adding in the value of your assets, and that equals the amount of your offer. So monthly disposable income sounds like kind of a technical term, but what it means is the difference between your actual income minus your allowable expenses. Allowable is the key word in that sentence, and what that means is things that the IRS determines are allowable. So food, clothing, miscellaneous, your housing and utilities expense, your transportation expense, your taxes, your out-of-pocket medical expense, your health insurance, things like that. So when we got done talking, didn't you say your annual income is about $65,000 a year?
Yeah. Personal annual income is about $65K.
And you have I forget how many kids, 6, 7 kids?
I forget 2 every day. We have 7 kids, but 6 are at home, so we're a family of 8.
So you're a family of 8 living on $65,000. And when you told me that, we weren't face to face, but I got a big smile on my face because I got really excited. Because I think there is an extremely high likelihood that with a family of 8 in the area that you live in, living on $65,000 a year, you're going to have a negative monthly disposable income. There just isn't any money left. Is that fair to say?
It's very fair to say.
So, and we can laugh at it because it's kind of a sad story, but I have a very sneaking suspicion that after we get this thing settled, it's going to turn into one of the happiest stories of your life. Because what we're going to do is we don't actually, and you have no assets. Is that fair?
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, because
I have a beautiful family. Those are my assets.
And I know that you're a really kind-hearted guy. You do run a company, and you employ a dozen relatives and things like that. And everybody's kind of struggling. And so when we go to do the math equation of the monthly disposable income times 12 plus assets, your monthly disposable income is negative. I mean, that's a pretty strong presumption that I have. And so whatever, and you have no assets. So if we tried to do the math, your number would come out negative. Well, that makes no sense. That would mean the IRS would pay you to settle your $125,000 tax problem. And, that's kind of nonsensical. So what we do in this situation, John, is we go ahead and we pick a number that we're going to offer to the IRS. It's really awesome. I have friends around the country. I'm not this brave, but I have friends around the country that are offering $1, $10, things like that. I did have one case where I offered $20 and it went through. I did that because I was kind of upset at the IRS agent and the situation, and I did it just to see what happened. It did go through. But in your case, we're probably going to offer like $250 or $500. You're gonna have to pay a filing fee of $186 and a 20% down payment. So if we offer $500, you got to come up with a $186 filing fee and a $100 down payment. So $286. I didn't tell you this yesterday because I forgot. But you're probably going to be under the federal poverty guidelines for a family of 8 at $65,000. So there's actually a really good chance that all of the filing fees and the down payment are going to be waived. It's pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
So,
that is cool.
So then we're going to go ahead and we're going to prep the offer. We're going to get a bunch of documentation from you and whatnot. And we're going to basically prove to the IRS that there is no chance in heck that you're going to be able to afford to pay back $125,000. We're going to file the offer. The offer is going to sit around at the IRS probably for 6 to 12 months before it ends up in somebody's queue, and then they end up working on it. That IRS employee is going to eventually call me, and then we're going to have to answer some questions and provide some backup documentation and some updated documentation and whatnot. And then they're going to come up with a number, most likely, typically. And that number might be what we offer. It might be the $500. It might be $1,200. I don't know. It might get rejected. There might be some fact that you haven't told me about that I don't know. Anything can happen. But there's a pretty good chance, based on the facts that we've discussed, that this offer is going to go through at under $1,000. So after that offer is accepted and we get that formal letter, you're going to go ahead and have 5 months from that acceptance to pay that offer off. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. And you were saying also that's contingent upon me paying my estimated taxes.
Yeah, brilliant question, because I had forgot to say that. You do have to be current with your ongoing tax obligations. So in your case, you're self-employed, and so you're going to have to make some estimated tax payments because the IRS, frankly, cares much more about the fact that you're getting current and getting back into the system than they do about collecting that old money. I'm not going to have much trouble, I don't think, in demonstrating that you can't pay back the old tax, but I have to be able to demonstrate to them that you and I have had this conversation and that you get it and you're going to be making estimated tax payments and remaining current, forevermore. One of the conditions of the offer and compromise is that you have to remain current, file your tax returns on time, and pay them for 5 years. So are you going to have a problem with that?
No, absolutely no. I won't.
Seems like a pretty good deal, right?
Yeah, I've learned the value of paying my taxes on time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've learned a lesson.
So I have some notes here because I knew we were going to be talking about this today. And one of the other reasons why people end up not dealing with their tax problems right away is because they're procrastinators, right? I mean, the personality profile of most people who have tax problems is they're procrastinators. They didn't file their returns on time because they didn't want to deal with the accounting. They just didn't want to deal with it. And so they have a tendency to procrastinate until almost the world falls out from underneath them. In fact, today I was talking to a gentleman who came in, hadn't filed for about 20 years. He's going to owe about $125,000. And, he didn't do anything until the IRS actually levied his income source. And that's really not a good idea because what happened is they levied his income source. And now what's he going to do? He doesn't really have the money to hire professional help. He doesn't have the money to get caught up on his estimated tax payments. He's actually in a bind. So procrastinators are definitely one of the types of personalities that end up with tax problems for sure. Did you file your returns right away when you were supposed to?
Yeah, because my frame of mind at that point was I just didn't want to go to prison. And that seems to be what was scaring me more than anything. So I said, listen, I'd rather, if you go to, if there's a such thing as going to prison for not paying your taxes, that's fine, but I'm not going to go because I didn't file my taxes. Or I tried to hide money somewhere. I always report 100% of the money I make, and it's all easy for me to figure out because it's all electronic payments. But I had no worries there, and I don't have that many deductibles that I was trying to take. So so a long way to say, we filed all that on time.
Well, that's really good. I mean, you wouldn't want to have the shame and the fear and the procrastination all wrapped up in one person. That'd be pretty bad. But I do run across people like that. In fact, one of my favorite procrastination stories is one time I had a gentleman come into the office, and he was very nervous. He was visually shaken. He was sweating. He was trembling. He was an older gentleman in his 60s. And he sat down, and I kind of just wanted to put him at ease. And so I said a few nice things, weather kind of conversation things. And then I asked him what was going on. And he said, well, I think I'm going to go to prison over this tax stuff. And I asked him why. He said, I haven't filed a tax return since 1960. And let's just say I was born several years after that. And I got a big grin on my face. And I actually kind of smiled. And I was pretty happy because I knew I could solve the problem for the guy. And ultimately, he owed maybe $75,000 or something, and we filed an offer in compromise. We got them all taken care of. But, I mean, that's my favorite procrastination story. I don't know if I'm ever going to meet somebody that procrastinated, for 55 years or whatever. So, procrastination is definitely a big problem. And then I guess there's some people who are just oblivious to their tax filing obligations. You think that's true?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I didn't even think I was going to owe tax. I mean, this is how out of my mind I was. I was used to getting a little bit of money back every year with earned income credit with the amount of children we had, and I was shocked when the guy said not only was I not getting money back, but I had to pay money, and it was something that I was just oblivious to. It's embarrassing for me to say, but if you are not used to having a tax bill, when one comes, it's a surprise.
Yeah.
It was a big surprise.
Well, John, we're at the bottom of the hour. This is a hard break. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you want to stay over? You have anything else you want to talk about, or are you good?
I'm good. And if you need me to stay over, but I just want to say I have a lot more hope waking up today because I feel a lot lighter because I handed that off to you, and I know it's in good hands, and now I can get busy building my life again. And I think, because I know we just getting into the process, but just handing you the baton feels pretty darn good.
Outstanding. You're going to give me an opportunity. Are you suffering from IRS problems? Do you owe back taxes you can't pay? Is your paycheck or bank account being levied? Or maybe you haven't filed tax returns in years and simply don't know what to do. This is Darrin T. Mish to tell you that if you're tired of IRS problems hanging over your head and are ready for a fresh start, we may be able to help. Call the law offices of Darrin T. Mish at 888-GET-MISH, 888-GET-MISH. I can help you file old tax returns, work to release tax liens or stop wage levies, even negotiate deals to pay off back taxes at a discount, sometimes for pennies on the dollar. Hey, let's face it, these days it's not hard to get into tax trouble. A divorce, failed business, health problems, you name it. The point is, IRS problems may be solved if you're willing to take the first step. Call for a free consultation at 888-GET-MISH. That's 888-438-6474. Or go to the web at getirshelp.com, because the one sure thing is, IRS problems don't solve themselves. So get Mish. 888-438-6474. Principal Office, Tampa. Welcome back. This is your IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin Mish. And I think I'm being joined by my co-host, Katrina Madewell. Katrina, are you there? We might be having some technical difficulties with Katrina.
That's all right. We have to show up and do our real job. We don't always get to do the fun stuff every day.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, were you listening in our last segment where John called in?
I missed the last segment. I'm sorry. I had those appointments move around. I missed it. What did I miss?
No problem. We're going to go ahead and recap it anyway. The situation is John and I have known each other for about a year. We have a close professional relationship, and that's turned into a friendship. And we chat or communicate many times every day. So we have this close relationship, and yesterday he finally lowers the boom on me, and he goes, hey, dude, I got a tax problem. And I'm like, really? How come you haven't told me before this? I mean, you know what I do for a living. You listen to the show. I mean, you can probably recite what I say, verbatim. He says, well, I owe $125,000 from 2011, 2012. I had a downturn in business, and I was ashamed, Darrin, to tell you, about the problem. And so we chatted about it, and it turns out that he's at, when you're a business owner, you have up cycles and down cycles.
Of course, yeah.
So he's right in the middle of one of those troughs that, us business owners really dread. But he's in the middle of a trough, and he's an entrepreneurial guy. He's a naturally optimistic guy, and he's just fired up that he can out-earn his way out of this $125,000 tax problem. But he confided in me that he's in this trough, and he's making about $65,000 a year supporting a family of eight. And we discussed it, and we decided that now is the opportune time for him to go ahead and file an offer in compromise. Because you got to take advantage of the challenges that you have in life. I believe very firmly that every challenge that we face in life is really an opportunity in disguise. You just have to find out what the opportunity is. And his opportunity here is when you're earning $65,000 a year and you're supporting a family of 8, it's not going to be real hard to convince the IRS that, you have no ability to pay.
I know. I can imagine the hardest thing for him, as your friend, would be just to tell you that he had a problem. But I could see you're very humble, taking that with just such grace and like, hey.
Yeah, you just cut out, Katrina. But, when we were talking on the phone yesterday, I was actually a tiny bit hard on him. And the only reason I was a tiny bit hard on him is because we're buds, we're friends. And I was kind of giving him a hard time about, now, come on, man. I understand you're an optimistic guy and that, business is eventually going to turn around for you. And I know it will. But now is the time to go ahead and just face this fear. Let's give it a shot. The worst thing that could happen is the IRS says no. The best thing that could happen is the IRS says, hey, we'll settle for some small amount of money that he can swing.
What's the time period usually that they actually come back and give you an answer? How fast or slow is that process? I forget.
It's usually running, if he's self-employed like he is, it's usually running somewhere between 6 to 12 months, which is kind of a drag, right? I mean, once you do this, you kind of want to know. But it's 6 to 12 months, sometimes faster. But the great thing is that during that time that the offer is pending, there's actually a collection hold on the account. That means the IRS has to leave you alone. Now, in his case, it was kind of a cool fact was that they'd already placed his account into what's called hardship status. So they've already done financials with the IRS, and the IRS has already come to the independent conclusion that he has no ability to pay on a monthly basis. Now, if you're making $65,000 a year and you're supporting a family of 8, I don't think it takes a brain surgeon to realize you can't afford to pay anything. But that's the time to take advantage of this. There wasn't a real dispute about that he couldn't afford to pay. So I was a little bit hard on him. I'm like, yeah, we got to do this offer. We got to do it pretty much now, and we got to get this thing in, because what happens if his business really does turn around and he makes, $200,000 or something? Well, then the offer is going to be.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. What happens since it takes so long, since it's 6 to 12 months, and that offer is on the table, and let's say he gets a good 6-month period in a few months. I mean, are they going to be able to freeze his bank account or swoop any money or do any of that crazy stuff?
Well, no, because what will happen is just the offer will be rejected. It doesn't mean they're going to immediately levy his account or anything like that. But I have a story I like to tell about this situation. I once represented a realtor right as the boom was about to happen here in Southwest Florida, and he owed about $75,000, and we submitted an offer in compromise because he was struggling. But right before we filed the offer, he says, Darrin, I think I'm going to start making about $50,000 a month. And I said, well, I think you would agree with me that if you start making $50,000 a month, that's a quality problem, and that paying $75,000 really won't be that big a deal. And the client said, yeah, okay, I'm down with that. I can agree with that. So we filed the offer, and lo and behold, that's what happened. He started selling, lots of high dollar stuff, high volume, high dollar stuff, and he made a lot of money. And so his offer was rejected. And then he called me when the offer was rejected, and we had a conversation. He was kind of complaining. He was kind of pointing fingers and stuff. And I said, now, wait a minute. let's go back to that conversation we had on day one where you agreed if you were making that kind of money, that would be a quality problem. And he kind of sheepishly agreed, and he ended up paying the bill. But if this,
you got to look at the thing and think, wow, I mean, it could be so much worse. Like if you don't have the money, then of course you want to settle. But the worst case scenario is you're not making the money, and the IRS still wants the money.
Yeah, and so I think this is a really important point, and this might happen in John's case, and that is that sometimes after the offer and compromise is filed, then that background anxiety, that background fear that he's been committing like mental and emotional brain cycles to, that gets significantly alleviated. And sometimes you do see that entrepreneur type, his business really start to skyrocket ahead of time, ahead of schedule, so to speak, because he's not dealing with it. He's not crippled by it anymore. Now, I know John pretty well, and John's pretty much crippled, emotionally by having this problem in his life. It's a pride thing. He's the provider for not only his family of 8, but for his extended family. He employs about, I think, 10 or 12 other family members. They live in a very small town. And he's got a lot of pride wrapped up in the fact that, he owes the IRS a lot of money. And I don't blame him for that. I kind of hope it doesn't work out like that. My ideal outcome for John would be that we file the offer and compromise, it settles in 4 to 6 months, and then in month 7, his business takes off, and, he's off to the races.
And, like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said it's about what you're going to take away from the experience, not about the present moment.
Yeah, I don't think that, knowing John as well as I do, I don't think he'll ever have a tax problem again. I really don't. I think if he ends up, making $500,000 a year or whatever, like he did in the past, that, especially through our help, we'll make sure that he pays his taxes on time, and he's going to be grateful to pay his taxes on time. But, when you end up in a problem this seemingly insurmountable where you owe over 6 figures to the IRS, you need a break. Most people need a break. No, there's not a lot of people that are going to be able to use brute force to go ahead and, work their way out of this. I happen to know John, like I said, really well. He works 6.5 days a week, and he's working 12 plus hours a day. We had to talk about that too, in the fact that he's working so hard, he's reached the point of diminishing returns and effectiveness. But that's how dedicated he is to his family and to try to out-earn his, this problem. And it's just not going to happen. We need to use an alternative administrative sort of solution.
You can't always out-earn stupidity either, can you?
I think you
have to learn from those things.
I think he's listening, and John, Katrina just called you stupid, I think. But, No,
that's not at all. I said out-earn your stupidity. And when I say that, I'm digging on myself because I was there in my young 20s. And my takeaway from that is you can't out-earn your stupidity, meaning, okay, you make a stupid mistake, everyone's done it, but let's, what are we learning from this? Let's chalk this up and move on. And, more importantly, what can you teach your kids to take away from this so that they don't end up in that same position?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and make sure, we all do stupid things. We all make mistakes and whatnot. And I think as it's a demonstration of a mature person to, when we do something stupid and we manage to get our way out of it somehow, that we keep the lesson, we make sure that we learn a lesson out of that hardship that we had, and make sure that we emerge better people. And I think there's a lot of opportunities where there's a lot of people, frankly, in our society that don't do that. They make dumb mistakes, and they make similar dumb mistakes over and over and over. But I think it's the sign of an enlightened, mature person where they make a mistake and they grow from it.
Well, the crazy part is, when you owe the IRS money, maybe I'm wrong, Darrin, but I don't think there's a whole lot of resources out there to really get help. Like, if you're trying to get out of debt, there's a million books that you can read on getting out of debt and building wealth. But, owing the IRS money and how to avoid that whole situation, there's just not a lot of resources out of it. And I think sometimes that's one of those things where if you do earn a lot of money and you have those valleys and you weren't prepared for that, that's that life lesson that you get.
Yeah, that's why I have so many videos, and that's why I'm doing the radio show, frankly. That's why I do a podcast, is because there's not a lot of resources out there. If you go to my website at getirshelp.com, I think there's over 200 videos where I explain in really clear detail how to handle every IRS problem under the sun, pretty much. I haven't told you this story because it's kind of cool, but I had a guy from Phoenix, Arizona, wrote in last week, and he told me that he had actually solved. He had a wage levy and a bank levy, and he didn't have any money, and he went on YouTube and he searched for those, subjects. He watched my videos. He followed my instructions in painstaking detail, and he managed to get his own levy released. Now, there's some people that think that I wouldn't like that, right? Because he didn't pay me any money. But no, I was pumped. I was stoked. I thought that was the coolest thing ever, that I actually introduced value into the universe and that someone benefited from that value. And that sounds kind of corny, and it might even sound insincere, but I just have a firm belief that there's plenty of people out there with IRS problems. It's something like 10% of the population has a tax problem. And I just know that if I just put value out there to help people, some people solve their own problems, and plenty of people will give me a call and allow me the opportunity to help them as well.
Everybody has to have their mission in life, and you really should. Not only should you know a lot about what you do, but I think when you love what you do, and it just comes natural. And I'm here. Welcome back.
Thank you. So this is kind of a gratuitous question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. From someone who wants to remain anonymous, her question or his question is, what's the best way to get in touch with me? I need your help. So the first thing I would say is, hey, call in, 727-441-3000. That's 727-441-3000. If you're shy.
We're live.
Yeah, we're live right now. And if you're shy, or if you're not as brave as John was today to talk about your problem in real time, you can call the office at 888-GET-MISH. That's 888-438-6474. Or you can always kind of visit our website at getirshelp.com, and you can do what we call the slow yes. Now, Katrina, I've not ever mentioned this on air, but I have a book called The 7 Secrets That the IRS Doesn't Want You to Know About. And if you visit the website at getirshelp.com, you can, just for your first name and your email address, we'll go ahead and send you a free copy of that ebook. It's only about 30 pages long, and it tells you over 7 secrets that the IRS doesn't want you to know, so that some of that fear and then anxiety can be dissipated. Because frankly, the reason that we're fearful of things is because we have a lack of knowledge. And I think that's why most taxpayers are afraid.
Of course. Fear of the unknown, fear of Big Brother, all that jazz, all the horror stories you hear.
I have another question. It says, I'm behind on my taxes for 2015 as well as 2014. Can I lump both years together in an offer and compromise, or do I need to get current on this year first? This is really a good question. I know that
That's a very good question.
Yeah, I know that John's in this position, and I talked to another gentleman just today, that's in this position as well. We're just started the 10th month of the year. And if you haven't made any estimated tax payments for the year, it could be a considerable amount of money. It could be. And in fact, in the situation where the gentleman that came in today, it was $6,000. So in order to file an offer and compromise, within the rest of 2015, he would have to come up with $6,000 to basically cover the 2015 liability. So I made his day when I told him, hey, I think you're probably behind the 8 ball on that. I don't know that you're going to be able to come up with that. Why don't we wait until January? Then you'll have to just get caught up for your estimated tax payment for the month of January, just 1 month. And then we'll file an offer and compromise. Then we'll just lump 15 on top. Needless to say, he liked that answer very, very much.
Oh, I bet he did.
So,
is that what I get what you're saying with the tax payments being behind, but what about the tax return? Is that ever an issue?
Well, you got to file all your tax returns in order to file an offer and compromise for sure. That's part of being current. So what he would need to do, and that's a good question, by the way, what he's going to need to do is he's going to need to file his 2015 pretty early in that cycle. You have until April 15th, right, or October 15th with an extension. But especially if you're self-employed, you can file your return in January. You're probably not waiting on W-2s and 1099s. It's just a matter of, do we have the information to file it? So yeah, we'd have to prepare the return pretty early in the filing cycle and make sure that thing got on there so we could put it on the offer.
So just file the return, don't pay whatever you owe, figure it out, lump it together, settle whatever it is, and then that's your reset button, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like bankruptcy. When you file bankruptcy, what's bankruptcy there for? Bankruptcy is there to give the debtor a fresh start. And the concept of bankruptcy has been in our culture for hundreds of years. And it's a well-known and sort of understood fact that some people get themselves into such debt problems that they just can't pay their way out. And the offer and compromise program was set up by Congress frankly, to deal with a very similar situation. It's to give the taxpayer a fresh start. It's really to get the taxpayer back into the tax system. Because if there isn't some way out, what's the normal taxpayer going to do? They're just going to go in the shadows. They're just going to stay out of the system. And it might go on another 5, 10, 20, 30 years, So it allows them to go ahead and just get a fresh start.
That's a good point for people not to lose sight of, and that makes total, complete sense. That they want you to basically reset so that you'll get back in the system and you'll start repaying. Because if you forever dig that hole and you never come back, that's just not how our country's set up to operate.
Yeah, and it's not fair. And our country really is predicated upon a concept of fairness. And it just isn't fair to allow some people to get so far behind on their tax debts that they really can't get out of it. And that's why Congress set up the system, because it's just basically fundamental fairness. Did they make mistakes to end up owing over $100,000 in taxes? Sure. Nobody's going to dispute that. John from earlier wouldn't even dispute that. I mean, he made a mistake. I've made a mistake. You've shared that you've made mistakes and ended up owing taxes. Fortunately, between you and I, we were able to pay our way out. But some people, you get up into our train wreck of the week's coming up here in a minute, and I'm going to tell a story about somebody. There was just no way this guy was ever getting out of the problem that he created.
The crazy part, Darrin, I actually pay my tax payment before I pay myself. Isn't that crazy?
Well, that's kind of what you have to do, Like, I'm sure that as a realtor, you counsel people when they buy a house. Now, listen, you're going from a renter into, a homeowner. You got to put that mortgage payment right at the top of the stack, man. It's like your electric bill. What happens if you don't pay your electric bill? Well, you're hot down here in Tampa. You end up really hot and you end up in the dark. They just turn it off. Well, it's kind of similar with a mortgage. If you don't pay your mortgage, eventually they're going to kick you out of your house. Well, same thing with a tax bill. If you don't pay your tax bill, eventually you're going to end up with this anxiety and this giant problem that we've been discussing. You just have to, especially with estimated tax payments, you just have to put the priority really high.
Yeah, but like you said, it's a matter of, I was in that issue. You had that issue, and we learned from that issue. And that's like, I haven't even written my paycheck yet, but the IRS got their money.
So I have a really, really funny question before we go to the train wreck of the week, and that is, it says, no question for you. Just want to let you know I love your show. Are you and Katrina partners? And I got to tell you, I got a good chuckle out of that one. Well, I guess we're partners on the show. We're certainly not life partners, right?
No, we have our own spouses, and we're mentally partners, I guess, for the show. And no, my business is completely independent of Darrin. But that's a great question.
Yeah, I like that. And you're such a good partner that even though I thought I was flying completely solo today and I was kind of fumbling my way through, you ended up calling from the car to help me out. And I want you to know I really appreciate that.
Me too. I'm sorry I had to rearrange stuff a little bit. I had a lady I had to reschedule from yesterday to today, and it ran late. So I'm still here.
Yeah, it's all about helping people, and that's what you needed to do. You needed to be gone so you could help that lady. Okay, so we're going to talk about my favorite segment of the show. I had to scratch my head today, honestly. I didn't have somebody right top of mind, but I actually got an email from this gentleman yesterday. He was self-employed for a number of years, and he ended up racking up a tax bill of $396,897. Now, that is a lot of money. And he went through and suffered the downturn in business that we were discussing, the recession. I guess the recession kind of started in 2008, right? Is it over yet? I don't know. I think it is officially, but I don't think it is in reality. But
I mean, we still have a bunch of stuff lingering, like that property I was in earlier. It's a really weird mix. I mean, there's foreclosures in there. The prices are over $100,000 spread all over the board. It was a really tough one to pinpoint a value on. So, are we out of the recession? That's a loaded question. I don't think we are.
I think politically we have to say we are, because we are growing, albeit at the slowest rate in the history of any recovery. I think it's around 2%. But I'm not here to talk politics. So he suffered a downturn in business, and then sort of he had a double whammy, and this is fairly common. He ended up with some kind of debilitating illness where he can't even really go out of his house. I mean, he can go out to pick the kids up from school. He can work, but only remotely. He can't really travel like he used to. And so we ended up filing an offer in compromise for him, I think in 2013. And I forget what we offered, but not a lot, because we were able to show that, he had these problems and he had a real hard, almost no ability to pay. And you know what happened, Katrina? The IRS actually came back and they rejected his offer. And it was really a bummer. He was really disappointed. I was disappointed. And they had some cockamamie theory that he, had the ability to pay the whole thing, which is crazy. So we did what we have to do sometimes, which is we went ahead and filed an appeal with the IRS. And that appeal took about 7 to 9 months, quite a while. But, the train wreck of the week always has a happy ending. And so what happened is in April of this year, they actually came back, accepted at $1,221. So he had to come up with $1,221 to settle $396,897. So almost $400,000. He settled for just a little over $1,200.
That's so amazing, because that's more than most people's house in the Bay Area.
Oh, the $400,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he owed a tremendous amount of money, but when it came right down to it, with the health problems that he has and the limited income that he had, what were the odds that he was ever going to be able to pay that? I mean, the odds were infinitesimal. And so, I was very pleased we were able to convince IRS appeals that was the very best deal the IRS was ever going to get out of him. And I know he just contacted me the other day. He made his last payment. And he's just waiting for all those tax liens to be released so he can get on with his life. And I know that he's jazzed about it. And I got to tell you, those cases are a lot of fun. Again, I say this a lot, but it's thrilling to be able to be trusted to help people with the very biggest problem they have in their lives.
I'm sure. I mean, I can't even imagine. Like I said, I wish the one tax problem I had in my whole life, I wish I knew you then. I didn't, unfortunately, but, I do now. So it's, I was thinking with your show, it's right on time, and I don't normally promote my show, but I have 2 shows lined up this week, which I think tie into, I can imagine the burden that people feel when they come in to visit you initially. So the guy that I have today on the 5 o'clock show, this whole quest for organic happiness, I thought that would be a little uplifting. And then Rachel Cruz, Dave Ramsey's daughter, is going to be on Saturday at 5 talking about teaching your kids how to win with money.
No, that's awesome, and I'm glad that you went ahead and told us about that.